take the time to stop and think about that, and think about what it is that we owe God the Father, the respect that we need to have and the honor that we need to show to Jesus the Son, and the attentive ear that we need to give to the Spirit as He tries to direct us, gives us some things to stop and pause and think about. In Luke chapter 15, and I'm jumping ahead of myself, but in Luke chapter 15, there are some parables that are listed there that deal with some things that are lost. There was a young man in one of those who went to his father one day and he said, "Give me my inheritance." And the father gave him his inheritance and he went on his way. We know that story as being the prodigal son. What we don't think about is when we're chastising him as we read through that parable, is that he actually had the right to ask for those things. He actually had the right to go to his father and say, "Give me what's mine." Scripture tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 23 that all things are lawful. It's my right. It's my right to go to my father and get what is mine. What we know as we continue to read that story is that he goes out, he takes what he has been given, and he squanders it, and he loses it all, and then he finds himself in the pig pen. What we do with scriptures a lot of times is we take the part that is important and significant to us and we throw that out there, but we forget to read the whole thing. As you go on and you look at the rest of chapter 10 and verse 23, it says, "All things are lawful, but not all things are profitable. All things are lawful, but not everything is going to edify or build up or strengthen." So while all things are lawful for me, and basically for anyone who's ever told you, "Hey, it's my life, I can do what I want," they're right. It is their life. They can do what they want. Problem is, the things that I want and the things that I choose to do with my life a lot of times are not what are profitable and what are going to edify. In Luke chapter 15, now that I've got Ken thoroughly confused back there. In Luke chapter 15, these parables deal with three things that are lost. These things are things that were precious to the one who lost them. So they take the time to go out and seek them. As I read these parables growing up, I always looked at the outcome of what happened to the thing that was lost. Because, quite frankly, that's where I am. I'm like the sheep. I'm like the sheep that went astray. I'm like the sheep that wandered with my head down, just grazing with no direction. Just wherever I go, that's where I end up. Till I look up one day and I find myself too far away to come back. I'm like the coin that got separated from the rest of the group. But at least the woman took the time, once she realized it was lost, to leave everything else and to go and seek out that one that was lost till it was found. I'm like this son who has turned his back on his father sometimes and wander away. But the father waits anxiously for me to come back. You know, the thing that's interesting about these parables is that for the shepherd, the one sheep that was lost at that particular moment was more important than the 99 that was left out there in an open field. So he went and he sought it out and he brought it back. The coin that was lost, 10 silver pieces, all had the same value as far as you look at them on the surface. But once one got separated, the woman was concerned enough that she went and grabbed a lamp and she searched and swept the house carefully, some translations say. Other translations say diligently. She took the effort to find what was lost. She pulled out the seat cushions. She shuffled all the papers around on the table. She moved things until she found what was lost. And then for the prodigal son, you got the father who, although he had another son, the one that was lost was the one that he was most anxious about. There are a lot of things, and there's been lots of speculation about the attitude of this father while his son was gone. Did he sit out on the porch waiting for him to come back? I mean, I don't know how long it took this guy to waste all his money and find himself eating with the pigs. But while he was there and while he was gone, the father waited anxiously for him to return. And if he sat on the front porch, or if he just, every time he walked by the front window that led out down the road, if he just glanced and looked and paused a second to see if he was, whatever it was, I know that at some point the father was waiting for him to come back, because when this guy comes to his senses and he gets his speech ready and he starts heading down the road home, Dad sees him while he's still a long way off. Now, I don't know how far a long way is, but it was far enough that the father left the house, jumped off the porch, ran down the road, and met him. So I know he was waiting. And I know he was excited when he came back. I want to tell you guys some things about a father. I have a great father. He's loving and caring and kind. He's had to put me back in direction a time or two when I've gotten out of line. But for the most part, he is a great guy. My father is probably the greatest in the whole world. How many of you feel like that? My father's the best. I got the greatest. My father is the greatest in the whole world. But I've not always done well by my father. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 23. For me, a lot of things were lawful that Dad didn't necessarily see fit for me to engage in. So I stepped outside that line. I've been like that sheep. I've been like that coin that was separated. I've been like that young man who finds himself amongst the pigs. I too have run away from home just to have my father wait for me to come back. How many of us ever packed a bag because our parents were not good enough to us and said, "That's it, I'm leaving"? We've done it whether we like to admit it or not. At least we've thought about it. How far do I actually get before I realize, you know what, this isn't the best idea? How cold does it have to get, or how dark does it have to get before I realize, oops, I messed up, and I come back? All of this caring and all of this concern that is given to this young man, I've received as well from my father. And I'm going to tell you guys something about me you may not realize. I was adopted. My biological parents are the greatest in the world. I've never had need of anything. I've never gone hungry. I've never gone without a shirt. I've never been homeless. They've always been there to care for me. But on September in 1974, when I turned around and I started heading back because I wandered away, according to Isaiah chapter 59 and verse 2, I caused a separation between me and my father because of my sin. September 1974, he ran out to meet me. He came and he covered me and he washed all my sins away. He washed my sins away. He washed all the pig slop of sin off of me, not just with the waters of baptism, but he also took my older brother's blood and he used that to cleanse me as well. I stop and think when I read the story of the prodigal son and the older brother that comes to the father when the son finally comes home and the celebration is taking place, and he is so angry. He's so frustrated. I've been here working like a slave all this time, and he comes home from out of nowhere and you want to throw him a party. Would that older brother have been willing to give his life for his younger brother? Obviously not. But I've got a brother that was willing to do that for me. I've got one who was willing to cleanse me and cover me and make me better than I ever was. Romans chapter 8 and verse 15. Romans chapter 8. 15 is what I want to focus on, but I'm going to back up to verse 12. And I want you to listen to what has happened in our life. To listen to what's happened in my life. Romans chapter 8. So then, brethren, we are under obligation, not to the flesh, according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you must die. But if by the Spirit you are putting to death the deeds of the flesh, deeds of the body, you will live. For all who are being led by the Spirit of God, these are sons of God and daughters. For you have not received a spirit of slavery that leads again to fear, but you have received a spirit of adoption as sons, by which we cry out, Abba, Father. And the Spirit Himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, heirs also, heirs of God, fellow heirs with Christ, if indeed we suffer with Him, in order that we might also live with Him. When you stop and you think about the grace and the mercy of God that we have been singing about, and that we've been talking about, and that we've been encouraging each other with this morning, you start to get a feeling, or you should start to get a feeling, of how much God truly cares for us. I know some people I know couples who have adopted children and have great, loving, perfectly functionable homes. And for whatever reason, these couples who either could not have children of their own or just couldn't stand to see a child without a set of parents, they have sought out a child or multiple children to fill their homes and to fill their lives. They've got so much love that they've got to share that with somebody else. But if you know anybody who's ever had to deal with that and go through that process, that whole idea of the red tape and all the interviews and all the other junk that you have to go through just to make that happen is a pain. It's a headache. But once that adoption is final, once you have that child, once you're able to call that child your son or your daughter, and they turn around and they look up to you and they say Mom or they say Dad, then you know it was all worth the effort. God is that parent that wants to do that for us. He's the parent that wants to do that for you. His house is plenty big to handle as many people as are willing to take him on as their father. And I can only imagine the anticipation and the waiting through the red tape, through the interviews for that day that transaction is finally complete between you and your father. And I hope that someday, my prayer is that someday we will all be able to count that day that we became Christians as our adoption day. The day that we came back. The day that we focused on what needed to happen and how the relationship that I needed to have with that Father. The Father is ready. The Spirit is prepared. And your brother has given up a whole lot. He's given up everything. He's even given up all of heaven in order to come down here and be persecuted and die. In order that you might be a part of that great household of God. Some of us have made that commitment. And here's the great thing about my father. Is even though he's taken the time and the energy and the effort to adopt me, I still mess up and he still loves me anyway. He has put me in a house with several other new brothers and sisters that even though I mess up, they'll come to me and say, hey, you need to get your stuff together. And they still love me anyway. That's what I want for you. If you're a part of that family, if you're a part of that household, and you keep wandering off, your Father's waiting. If you have continued to mess up and disappoint from time to time, His patience is great enough. His anticipation is great enough that He's waiting. Not just for us to come to Him, but as we start coming, He's willing to meet us more than halfway. He's going to go far beyond anything that I could ever wish or imagine in order to bring us home. What I've got to decide is, Am I tired of living with the pigs? Am I tired of eating slop? Am I tired of being dirty? Is it time for me to clean up and get things right? The passage that we read this morning very simply has God saying, behold, I stand at the door and knock. He's that close. You remember Peter when he walks on the water and when he starts panicking and he starts to sink? Jesus was just as close as him reaching out his hand and picking him up to taking care of him. Your Father is just as close to the adoption day for you as He needs to be. All you got to do is open the door. But unfortunately, a lot of times, once I'm in the house and once I become a part of that family, I still run to my room and hide. He's still on the outside knocking. He still wants to make things right. My encouragement to us this morning is very simple. Find your Father. I'm not adopted, by the way. I don't think I am. At least they haven't told me I was. Not in a physical sense, but in a very real sense, we've been adopted spiritually, and that's what makes us new. That's what makes us new, and that's what makes Him great, and that's what gives me the opportunity to stand before confidence with all of my mistakes, with all of my inadequacies, with all of my failings, still have the opportunity to stand up before you today and say, "Come be a part of that family." Recognize your adoption into that family. Recognize that you've got a brother that would go to any length to make sure that you're saved. Make sure that you understand that you've got a Spirit that's going to guide you each and every day of your life if you're willing to make the changes. See, He's done His part. House is made, family's ready, provisions are made, papers are signed, everything else is done. I've just got to decide, do I want to pack my bags and go home? If you want to do that today, we want to help you with that. And if there's any way that we can encourage you to do that today, we want to ask that you let those things be known while we stand and sing.